6:30-ish, there'll be more coming in, but I want us to track down a few things that are going on, so we'll have these dates in our head. But a week from Saturday is the
Fall Festival.
Fall Festival. So everybody needs to remember that and come and be a part of it. So we're looking forward to that. Anybody that said it's the Tennessee-Florida ball game, that's after the Fall Festival. Somebody reminded me of that today. Also, next month, there are a couple of things going on, but Linda, when's the seniors? 15th of October, which is a Thursday.
Well, they can have food that started about 8:30 and registration, and then the program starts at 9.
Okay.
And we'll end somewhere between 3:30 and 4 o'clock break this lunch.
Okay. So there's worship times, there's workshops or classes, and just a fun time had by all. And it's okay. And that is here at the church, and it's a area wide, Tri-City wide and beyond the seniors rally. So if you consider yourself a senior or fastly, just closing in on that, which everybody is. So come and be a part of that. It's always a fun day. What other dates are going on we need to mention? Anything?
We could use more apple pie rollers and fillers.
More apple pie rollers and fillers.
Tomorrow morning, 8:30.
Tomorrow morning, 8:30. It's a labor of love because they all get gone in a week anyway.
That's right.
But 8:30 tomorrow morning, if anybody could come and help. They're doing, I think the goal is 2,100, am I right? Or so?
2102, yes, 2106 to be exact.
2,106. How many's been done so far?
Well, I can tell you that we have 840 left to go.
840 left to go, so they could use some help tomorrow. That's a lot of apple pies, or fried apple pies. I came over yesterday to help. I thought they were cooking them. They were just freezing them, so I didn't help. Okay, anything else? Okay, let's have a word of prayer to begin, and let's stand to do that. And Mark Norman, would you open us in prayer?
Father, it is certainly good to be in your house with our friends and loved ones and people who you call your children. We're so thankful that you love us, that you have sent your Son to save us from the things that we do that are contradictory to your will. We pray that you would be present in this place, that you would open our eyes to your word, that our hearts would be open to greater service to those that you love, Father. Bless this time of worship. Equip us to do your will. It's in the name of Jesus Christ I pray. Amen.
I want to do a couple of things tonight before we get into Philippians that will just sort of piggyback on what he's going to say, but a couple of things that he's going to throw some terminology out that when you hear it, you can sort of get lost in it, but I want you to understand what the two words mean, then it'll make a whole lot more sense. And there's about 3-4 things I'm going to share with you real quick, not in any particular order, but I think will go well with what we're going to learn tonight. First one is the observation that when we talk about the work of the church, we're either talking about the church within, ministry to ourselves, personal growth, or we're talking about the church's community without and reaching other people. I really believe, and this is not a negative, I think it's a growth issue, personal growth issue. I really believe that if every individual in the church took very seriously their Christian faith, churches would double about every year and a half, somewhere in that neighborhood. If we saw every person as having a soul, and I'll give you examples of what I'm talking about, would be simply if someone's sitting here, Mark Norman. Mark's working as a waiter in a restaurant. That'd be interesting to see. Can I help you? But Mark's working as a waiter in a restaurant, and he noticed that certain people that came in there were always kind. always respectful to him, even if he messed up. They tipped well, which is a way of showing their kindness. And as the trump card, they would always tell him when they could work it in the conversation, we'd love to have you come and worship with us. And Mark is not a Christian. He doesn't really want anything to do with it. But if he noticed, he started hearing that responsive behavior, that consistent behavior, he'd start saying, there's something goes on with those people that has made them all very pleasant to be around. And they're very open as to why, it seems like. He would give it a shot. He would give it a try. Then he walks in the door and somebody comes up and says, hey, you're the guy that waits on me. Or you're the guy that changes my oil. Or you're the guy that, sold me my suit. Or you're the guy that whatever. And Mark would be one to Christ. And so that's the community. And then we got the internal. Philippians tends to be a lot about the internal. What makes me that person that wants to say that to Mark? What makes me that type of person? And I think we need to see that with some of what we talk about tonight. Second observation is legalists rarely grow. Legalists rarely grow because once you've got the rules down, you're there. You've arrived. There's no more growth for you. You just keep keeping the rules. If it's the right days are observed, if it's the right behavior. I heard someone say today, and I know what they mean is some respect, but a young child was running a little bit. They weren't flying, running a little bit. It wasn't tonight, okay? It wasn't part of our church. And somebody said, stop running, this is God's house. We never get any mail that says God, 305 Christian Church Road, okay? But if you get a real legalistic attitude, then you can develop a lot of thoughts about what's right, what's wrong. And in doing so, you can determine who's wrong. But legalists rarely grow. They get all the right rules kept, and the ones that can be stretched, and the ones that don't matter, and they know what they are, and life goes on is pretty good. So just hold on to that thought. Legalists can't grow, and what we're talking about, Philippians, if you remember, is running toward Christ, that type of thing. Now let me give you two terms that are used, scriptural terms or theological terms that we don't talk about a lot in the church, but you'll see how this fits into this whole legalist can't grow idea. There's two terms, justified and sanctified. Justified. I want you to understand, I really want you to understand those tonight so that when they're used, you don't get lost and everything makes sense, because he'll just come through and hit them, bang, bang, and keep going. But I want you to really understand what the teacher tonight is saying when we watch this. Ed Boones. Ed he's been on the dark side of his sin life for a long time. And in other words, he's been pretty good at sinning. And Ed's big downfall is he's greedy. I wouldn't use you as an example, Ed. It's an example. Don't anybody say you shouldn't say that about Ed. What's he going to say about me? But Ed is greedy. He loves money. And it's, that he doesn't say a lot now, but that is the overwhelming, driving thought of everything he does in his life is, can I come out ahead on this? To the point he's not always totally honest if he's selling something and really forgets that he's representing Christ when he's buying something, and hoards a lot of money, has huge savings account, and when he hears of a need, somebody has a need, he's real quick, because it starts rationalizing to keep that God in place. He starts, well, we wouldn't need to help them if they weren't so lazy, or we wouldn't need to help them if they'd worked as hard as I did and all. So that greed is driving him. And then Ed realizes somewhere in his coming face to face with Christ, that's a horrible sin. I see now that I've been very materialistic, greedy, whichever route it takes. And Ed repents of that and asks God's forgiveness. Ed is at that point, immediately justified. Now, justified means he is immediately made right before God. That's justification. somebody comes and gives their life to Christ, they're honest about their sin, they are justified. Okay? Justification. They're made right before God. Their sins have been forgiven. Their salvation is immediate. Sanctification means, I'm giving him grief, he's moving. Sanctification means that Ed is becoming like Christ. So let's say Ed has been justified, but when he goes home after giving his life to Christ or wherever it happened, and Carol says, I bought something today, and he gets angry because she shouldn't have bought it, she spent money. He's still facing those same temptations. He's been justified, he's been forgiven, he's been saved. But what will happen is he will become, over a period of time, it's a process, more and more like Christ, and that's sanctification. You see the difference? One is an admission, a repentance, so that justification can take place. And because I've been justified, there's a process of sanctification. Paul talks about that when he says we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Paul talks about we're going from one stage of glory to another in his letters. And he's talking about the sanctification process. Now let me go back to the first observation I want you to have, is a legalist rarely grows. A legalist does not understand the need for sanctification. They see everything as instantaneous. I'm observing the right day. I'm wearing the right clothes. I've got the right attitude. I like the right songs. I know, when church ought to be held. That's a legalist. And once you've got all that down, there's no more growth. You and Jesus are just one and the same. But sanctification is a scriptural understanding that I'll never be like Christ. Now, we'll beat people up with that, but I'm telling you, it's a good thing. It's like you just shot your best round of golf ever, but you're going to shoot another better round of golf. Jay Walker ran his best 5K ever, right? But instead of saying, I hope I can beat it, sanctification is, I know I will one day. Okay? I'm becoming more and more what Christ would have me, so it's a very positive thing. Now, does everybody understand the two terms? Justification is made right before God. I'm righteous. I understand I'm a sinner in need of a Savior, and I've confessed that and come to Christ. That's justification. Sanctification is I'm becoming more and more like Christ, so that after a period of time, Ed is no longer even, his heart becomes cold to the temptation. And he begins, lots of times, people, like I described Ed, will become the people who are the greatest givers to the cause of Christ. They're becoming more and more sanctified. Okay? So keep those two terms. They're very important, and that'll help make a whole lot of sense tonight if you keep that up. Last thing, I want to ask you a question. Again, these will all come together as puzzle pieces, watching them doing this before instead of after. A lot of us, and he'll talk about this, and I appreciate it because I fell into this category. A lot of us grew up in church, and I don't mean we just went as a child, but we unlocked the doors and we locked the doors. And that's how I grew up in church. My grandfather was the minister at the church I was born into. He died when I was 2 years old, unexpected, had a stroke. But we never missed church. We never missed church. I remember going on vacations, and a lot I remember, people didn't go on vacations like they do now. There wasn't interstates and all. Uncle and my daddy get together and plan for a year the route they're going to take to go to the beach, and we'd be hyped up by Christmas for the trip in June. And you'd go on vacation. But I remember growing up, we left after church on Sunday. We felt guilty about that because Sunday night there was church. And we had to be back Saturday for church. And the rare occasion we were gone on Sunday, it didn't matter if we were in Timbuktu. We found a church, and we went to church on Sunday morning. You did that before you went to the beach or anywhere. You go to church, and that's how I grew up. And you've heard me talk about it before. If there was a revival, you were there every night. And I remember the nights that were always held in football games in the fall, and there'd be a home football game, and the guy there would just let everybody that went to the football game have it. And I remember I wasn't that old for it. I thought, I'm here. Why am I getting told off for going to the ball game? But we grew up in church. I want to ask you this question, because I know there's some of you here like that. What if, and we've always been pretty good people, but what if our deepest foray into sin, or I think the way he says it in the video, our greatest trip to the dark side was us thinking we were right, and in thinking we were right, we were driving other people away. Now that becomes very important, I think, for people who've been in the church for a long time. I think if you grow up in church, I think if you raise your child in church, we grow up sometimes with testimony envy. I used to think I'd love to be able to get up and tell everybody how sorry I was and how I found God. But that's pretty sick, you know. I'm very thankful for the way I grew up. But what you've got to do when you've been in the church a long time, or if you grew up in the church, is to be real careful that you were not so convinced you were right that you ended up driving other people away with those views, those legalistic views. And I'm just going to be real careful not to give examples what I'm talking about, because any we give will be personal to somebody, I'm sure. You know, but you got to be real careful that you're so convinced you're right about whatever the issue that you didn't drive other people away from coming to know God. So there's 4 or 5 little observations that'll help this video come to life tonight as we read from Philippians, okay? Let's watch it. It's like 20 minutes long, and if we have any time left, we'll come back and talk about it in just a minute.